Welcome to a new video on Beyond the Mean. I'm Patrick, and today we are diving into how to create an interactive map in R using the Leaflet package. We will use recycling data to visualize locations of stations in just a few lines of code. So let's get started. So I already loaded the required packages for this little project. So we have the deployer package for any data manipulation, the SF package or spatial feature package for anything related to doing spatial manipulations on the data, and of course the Leaflet package to actually plot a final map. So what we have in terms of data is this cyclistic data. I already loaded it. I can show in a different video how you actually can get this data and how to prepare the data. So when we look at the data, we can see that it consists of many trips. So just showing you the head of the data, you can see we have many trips and consisting of an ID, of course, what type of mode was used for the trip, when it started, when it ended, but also the start station name and the end station name, and most importantly, the coordinates for each station. What we would like to do now is to actually filter out the station and the station names and plot them on a map. We will focus on the start station because usually people just choose within the city one start station and end at another station. So the station names should be similar, so it doesn't matter whether you plot the start station here or the end station. Okay, so we have seen we have many trips, and of course, therefore duplicate stations. What we need first to do is to get the unique stations. So we do filter out duplicates. So we have unique stations, is our cyclist data. And then we can use deployer and actually use the distinct command to filter out these duplicates. As I said, we will focus on the start station. So we supply here the start station and say we want to keep the rest for now. And also, full screen here, when we can just focus on the start station name and the corresponding coordinates, latitude, but also longitude. Okay, now we can see if we go back to our console and say the number of rows in these unique stations. Object is over 2000, so we have about 2000 stations. I can also show you quickly the number of rows of our cyclist data, which is of course much larger because it consists of all the trip information and all the single individual trips. So if we look at the data again, the unique stations, we can see that we have all the single stations now, we have latitude and longitude. But we can also see it's not yet a spatial feature object, which we would need to create our map with Leaflet. So what we would like to do is to turn the unique stations object into a spatial feature object. To do that, we create a new object called unique stations SF. And when we use the SF package and the method of set as spatial feature, we can supply our original unique stations object and have to specify the coordinates in the data set. As you can see on the right-hand side, it's the start longitude and the start latitude. And we start here with the longitude, and as second statement, you supply the latitude. And we can also set the coordinate reference system. In our case, that's simply 4326. And we can run that. We look at this particular object again. We can see now that it is indeed a spatial feature collection. So now it can be actually used for plotting in Leaflet. All right. Now, to actually generate the map, we initialize a leaflet command. So you just type leaflet. And what we would like to do is to center our map. To do that, you do set view, and now you have to supply a longitude and latitude of the center. So to do that, we could just, write some specific number here. I just write number here and number, but because you do not want to actually do that hard coding a number, it would be best to actually use the center of all the stations we have as the center of our map, or the view center. To get the center of all the stations, let's create a new object, call it center of all. And now we want to use another method of the spatial feature package called union. So st union, and we are supplying our spatial feature object we just created in the previous step. So if I just run that, and we can look at this again, we can see now it is again spatial feature, and we can see it's multi-point now, and it combines all the stations we had individually just up here into one multi-point object. And given this multi-point object, now we want to find the centroid of all the stations, which can be used as our set view statement. So to do that, we just pipe this into another method of the spatial feature package, that's stCentroid. And because we actually want to have the coordinates which we can supply into set view, we use st coordinates to just get the coordinates and not a new spatial feature object. So if we look at center all again, we can see now we have only two things, an x coordinate and a y coordinate. So the coordinates of the center of all the stations we have in the data. Okay, now we can continue down here where we want to set the view. So we use our new object center of all and supply the longitude. So that's the x coordinate. So that's the first column, and the center of all 2. So the y coordinate for the latitude. As another argument, the setView function takes on zoom, which defines how zoomed in or zoomed out the view should be. You can play around with it a little bit, and the higher the number, the more zoomed in the final map will be at the beginning once you open up the map. So I played around a bit and chose 11, which is sort of close, but not as zoomed in onto one specific location. So now we just defined the outline of the map, so the view of the map, but we do not have an actual map yet. So what we would like to do next is to add a background of the map before adding our actual data to it. So to add a background map, you can use add provider files, and then you can just give it a specific name, and there are different options you can choose from as a background map. I'm using OpenStreetMap here, but there are also other options available. You can check the documentation. I can just bring it in here quickly. So we are using OpenStreetMap here, but you can see there are many different options you can choose from in terms of background map, different styles, different focus. You could also choose like a dark background map, but keep in mind these are specific providers. So here, for instance, you need to have an access token. You can read up in the documentation how to get an access token to actually use this kind of provider and this kind of background map and style. But we are using OpenStreetMap here. So as you can see, there's no access token required here, so it's quite easy. But feel free to change it to whatever you want. So now we have the view, we have the background, and now we can add finally our data. So since we have stations, it makes sense to add them as points, so that would be cycles. And we supply our spatial feature object of the stations because it's circles. We can also define the size of these circles. So I set it to 8, but also you can play around with it. And depending on how many points you have, you want to set it to a higher radius or to a lower radius. And you can choose some color. I just go with dark green, but again, choose whatever you like. And I also set an opacity in the case some points are overlapping. You can still see them finally. And as the last argument, you can also supply a pop-up. This is when you click on some point, what is actually shown. And for our case here, I just choose the station name. So that would be start station name. And that is all the coding. So if you run that, takes a second, and then it pops up in your internet browser. And as you can see here, all the different stations in our data set. So it's focused on Chicago. And as you can see, let me rewind it quickly. It is kind of zoomed out, but still not too much. So if you would change the zoom to, let's say 5, so about half of it, and run the entire thing again, you can see it's really zoomed out. We can still see our points here clustered around Chicago, but of course it wouldn't make sense to set the zoom level to such a high level. So going back to 11, it is sort of nice to see all the available points in our data set. And as we defined, if we click on some specific point, I can hit one, you can see here the particular station name. Okay, and that's already it. That's how you can generate a quick interactive map of some locations, in our case, stations, quickly in ARM, easy with the Leaflet package. So give it a try and see you in the next one.